I am. Okay. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's 8 o'clock on Thursday night, and you are listening to the 50th installment of the Age Out Angels Radio Hour on www.hamiltonradio.net. Channel 2, that's right, we made it to the half-century mark. Today's our 50th broadcast. I'm your host, Greg Rapport. I'm the founder and executive director of Age Out Angels. We're a 501c3 nonprofit corporation that provides one-to-one mentors to vulnerable youth for the purpose of coordinating the care and services that they need to survive, and hopefully help them avoid some of the horrible pitfalls that they're likely to face when they don't have a proper safety net. This program is brought to you every week at this same time, courtesy of Doc G, William Saunders, Ruben Rodriguez, and all the fine people here at Hamilton Radio who allow us to use this airtime. Doc G is on the big board tonight, along with Robin. Always a pleasure to see you both. And thank you so much at home for tuning in. Tonight on the Radio Hour, what families need to know about depression in typical teens and the added risk factors experienced by teens who were adopted, especially from foster care. We'll identify the difference between normal adolescent issues and actual depression and offer some tips for helping them deal with it. And then I'll reveal the 5 stages of grief that foster children commonly endure. And later in the show, we're going to give some tips on how to handle a situation where a child just becomes enraged as a result from prior trauma. It's called trauma rage. So now that I've thoroughly depressed our entire listening audience, I can tell you that I have guests with me tonight who have a pretty uplifting message. They are Scott Elliott and Reed Thomas from the Progressive Center for Independent Living, and they are here to help. So stay with us for the whole hour tonight if you can, and please remember all the other fine programs here at www.hamiltonradio.net. In fact, they're going to launch a new talent showcase right here at the station. Last week I told you it was going to happen in August. Looks more like September launch right now. So I'll have to keep you posted on that. And our guest tonight might actually be on that new talent showcase, and I'll tell you more about that later. Details are to follow. What it is, it's for music and comedy acts, and what you have to do is provide an audio or video recording of up to 5 minutes, and if it gets accepted, they will play it on the air, but then a panel of judges will critique your work. So my advice is to send your best stuff and leave the works in progress for another day, because they're not going to hold back. Email your files or send SoundCloud or some other cloud-based links to admin@hamiltonradio.net. admin@hamiltonradio.net. You could do that anytime and keep things in the queue so that we have them. And that's all right here on www.hamiltonradio.net. My guests, again, are Scott Elliott and Reed Thomas from the Progressive Center for Independent Living. We call it PCIL. I don't know if I can say the Progressive Center for Independent Living more than 20 times tonight. But if I say PCIL, right? Okay. Then everyone will know what I'm talking about. Their organization is all about giving disabled people access to the tools to help them live independently. And the reason I'm telling you this now is because, get ready, you may know someone who would benefit tremendously from their service, and you'll be pleasantly surprised at the age range that they serve. So don't go away. Make sure you're here from that. Call-in number tonight is 609-807-2492. Now, you may be wondering what is considered typical teenage behavior and what requires more immediate attention. And here's a tip sheet that focuses on whether your teen may be going through a temporary phase or instead may be suffering from teen depression. We'll also talk about the extra set of possible triggers that go along with being adopted from foster care or some other unstable home environment. According to the American Psychological Association, approximately 20% of teens will go through at least one episode of teen depression by the time they graduate from high school. After age 16, girls are significantly more likely to have depression than boys. Teen depression is widespread among all teenagers. However, children who have experienced multiple losses, as many adopted children have, are more vulnerable to depression. Quick definitions. Depression is generally categorized under three main types. There's mild depression. There's major depressive disorder, which is also called clinical or unipolar depression. And then there's bipolar disorder, which used to be called manic depression. Potential risk factors. Teen depression does not generally develop from one single occurrence. Often there are several risk factors evident in teens who have encountered trauma in childhood, such as physical and or sexual abuse, or having an unstable or absent caregiver. And think about that for a second. How do you get to foster care in the first place, right? You're either abused or neglected or both, and those risk factors are there. Now, other risk factors that I'm sure you can relate to include the breakup of a romantic relationship. That certainly happened to everyone. Hormonal changes everyone goes through. Being bullied at school. I think we all probably took our lumps. Even the bullies got bullied occasionally. Substance abuse, having a learning disorder or a family history of depression, feelings of rejection and abandonment, difficulty with self-identity. So these are all things that add up into risk factors that can create a depressive mood. How can you help a teen with depression? Well, Mental Health America reports that 6 out of 10 young people who have depression and who are most at risk of suicidal thoughts, difficulty in school, and difficulty in relationships do not get the treatment needed to support them. 6 out of 10 do not get the treatment necessary to support them. If you have concerns, it starts with talking, and it's not an easy discussion to have. In fact, I can't imagine a circumstance where it would be an easy discussion to have, because your teen is not going to want to admit anything to you. And that makes perfect sense to me, and should to you as well. So here's 2 general guidelines to consider. Number 1, offer support and reassurance. Communicate that you're here for them no matter what, and that you love them unconditionally. Try not to ask too many questions, but make it clear that you want to see them get the help they need. Be gentle but persistent. Try not to force the issue, but don't give up if your teen shut down when you try and talk with them. They will not feel comfortable admitting that they are feeling depressed and may not be willing to open up about their feelings. So you have to listen without judgment. When your child starts to open up, hold back on criticism and hold back on offering too much advice. That's point number 1. Guideline number 2 is to validate their feelings. Don't play therapist. Don't say, so how do you feel about that? Don't ask for possible reasons for their depression. Don't try to analyze it. Instead, validate their feelings by acknowledging their sadness and their pain. And then work towards getting them professional help, someone who can actually guide them through that process. Questions for you to consider that might help initiate conversation. Think about family history. Do any birth family members have a history of depression? Past health concerns. Has the child ever suffered from a long-term illness or disability, whether physical or mental? Previous issues. Were there previous difficulties at home? Past placements where they may have been placed in foster care, at school, or with friends? And is there a history of abuse? Has the child ever been a victim of or witness to any violence or abuse? And finally, unresolved concerns about their adoption. And now, of course, we're talking about adopted people, and they have a whole different set of things that they worry about. Do they still question why they were adopted? Do they have questions about their birth family? Is there missing information that they want to know about? Are they struggling with their identity? That happens a lot with adopted kids, no matter how secure a household that they're in. They wonder exactly who they are and, why their birth mother gave them up without a fight, and it's a normal thing to think about. Are they wondering if they're more like their birth family or like their adoptive family? Are they struggling with loyalty? It's interesting. Are they conflicted about loving their birth family, but also about loving you? Are they concerned about their siblings who may be in different placements? Do they believe you are truly their forever family, or are they still concerned that they could be moved again because that's what's happened before? These types of questions will hopefully provide some awareness and sensitivity towards the factors that may contribute to their depression. And remember, talking to your teens is only the first step in helping them with depression. Treatment process may feel frustrating at times. Recovery can be unpredictable, but don't give up. The difference between a challenge and an opportunity is often in your perspective. Best case scenario, working together will help give you opportunities to get closer to each other. And finally, before we take our break, from the foster parent assistant comes the 5 stages of grief suffered by foster kids. Loss comes in many ways to us all. Children in foster care experience a heavy loss when removed from their families. We may never understand the grief that they experience, but to dig a little deeper into this topic, you have to consider the 3 things: the feelings, the reactions, and the coping mechanisms of a foster child. So how do you feel when you lose someone special? You feel sad, angry, heartbroken, confused, maybe depressed? How does a foster child feel when separated from family? Sad, angry, heartbroken, confused, and depressed? It's the same. How do you react when you have those feelings? Cry? Withdraw? Are you on edge? Frustrated? Hopeless? Do you snap fast? Foster children react the same way. But as kids, the way they cope with these feelings oftentimes are quite different. Rages, outbursts, defiance. Any of this sound familiar? There are 5 stages of grief that foster children go through. Recognizing each stage will help you work more positively and effectively towards healing their fragile emotions. Stage number 1. It's called the honeymoon. Foster child typically hasn't been in the home very long, and it appears that they are happy and content, obedient, overly helpful, and desire to please their foster parent. You may even wonder why that social worker told you about all those negative behaviors that you have yet to see. That's because the foster child is in shock and denial. An understanding of what is happening has not hit them yet. And at this stage, the foster child is going along to get along. This stage can last a day, it can last a few weeks or a few months. It depends on the development and the age of the child, but that's the honeymoon phase. Phase 2 is called anger/protest. This is when the foster child realizes they aren't going home anytime soon. The anger stage will manifest as an outburst, a tantrum, defiance, aggression. This is the stage that catches most foster parents off guard, especially new foster parents. You just weren't expecting it. You weren't seeing it coming. This is also sadly the stage where most foster children are displaced from their foster home. This stage will not last forever, but could last a while. Seek support and advice from your favorite treatment team. Do your best to endure. Remember, foster children who need the most love will ask for it in the most unloving ways. Counseling from a trained therapist or psychiatrist will help your foster child process their grief and cope with it in a healthier way. I'm getting a sign from the producers. Do we have a caller on the line? Okay, can you ask the caller to hold, please? Is that possible? Until we go to break. Don't go away, caller, if you're there. Number 3, phase 3 of the grief of a foster child is bargaining. Bargaining. Maybe if I'm really good, I can go home. During the bargaining stage, the foster child believes their behavior is the threshold keeping them from returning to the biological family. And if they're very good, they will get to return. The foster child again goes back to doing everything they're asked. They become overly pleasing, and that leads us to phase 4, depression. Once a foster child realizes that there's nothing they can do to go home, it hits them really hard, and depression ensues. They will be listless, sad, withdrawn, and inactive. All their hopes laid on their good or bad behavior, realizing they can't control the situation, causes a foster child to fully experience the height of their grief. Your love and support will be needed. Sometimes a little space may be warranted as well. And the 5th stage is acceptance. Just because a foster child accepts their circumstances doesn't imply that all is forgotten yet. Many foster children will begin to adjust into their foster family's home at this stage. Often, this is frequently when a biological parent's rights have been terminated and the adoption is pending, or time and a lot of hard work from the foster parents have gotten them to this point. Once your foster child goes through a stage does not necessarily mean completion. A foster child does not graduate stages, and stages may not be reached in order. Stages are not like stairs that happen in succession with a clear-cut goal in mind until you reach the top. Stages may move perfectly from one stage to the next, however, can regress back to other stages at any time. The main thing to remember is the only way out is to go through. So before we get to our guest, please hit that share button on Facebook and send emails to all your friends and let them know that what we're doing here, because we need you to help us spread the word. And while you're doing that, let me remind you that we're on here every Thursday from 8 to 9 p.m. with the Age Out Angels Radio Hour. And we have a great lineup of guests coming up. August 23rd, we're going to have a very special night with representatives from Job Corps. August 30th, Antonio Garcia from the University of Pennsylvania will be here. And September 6th, a fascinating high school senior by the name of Elian Rubin will demonstrate his presentation called Coping with Bullying. So be sure to tune in every Thursday at 8 p.m. for what we consider to be our unfiltered look at the child welfare system. If you have specific questions, actually you can't call in right now because I think we have a caller on the line and I want him to stay with us for the duration of the show. So if you have a question or comment, you're going to have to write it into my Facebook page, or you can email directly to me, greg@ageoutangels.org. I answer every single question personally. And now please take a moment, hit that share button on Facebook. These children and their issues are buried so deep in the back of public consciousness, and real people are suffering here, so please give everyone you know a chance to hear this program. Let's take a short break. Hit that share button. We'll be back in 1 minute with Scott Elliott and Reed Thomas. See you in a minute. And we are back, and sitting next to me is Reed Thomas from the Progressive Center for Independent Living. Reed is an independent living resource specialist. And on the line, do we have Scott Elliott?
Yeah, hello, Craig.
Hi, Scott. It's good to hear your voice. Scott's a little loud in my headset. If you could back off on his volume just a little bit, Robin, I'd appreciate it. And Scott is the executive director of the Progressive Center for Independent Living. And so from now on, I'm just going to say PCIL. Welcome to both of you.
Most folks refer to us as Pickle.
Pickle? It's great to have you both here. I'm just going to talk to Reed first for a second, Scott, so bear with me, because we were having a lot of fun here in the studio.
You two guys with the guitars, I can understand that.
That's exactly what happened. We're two people who were cursed with the music bug at a very early age.
That's right. Why couldn't I have had the accountant bug?
And had to learn how to make a living. That's right. Later in life, and so we had a lot of good conversation here in the beginning. So and it's fascinating too. I mean, the reason I want to head right in this direction is because I want people out there to know that if you want to be involved in something in the way of a nonprofit that helps people, and in this case we're talking about people who have some form of mental or physical disability, correct?
Yeah, we serve anyone living with any disability of any age.
Okay, so if you want to be involved in something like this, you don't have to have a master's in social work, to do it. And it's a fascinating story. Reed, I want you to tell people, exactly like you started out, you were a musician, right?
Yeah.
And then you got a job at ARC, which is also a local nonprofit.
Yeah, there was an opportunity there through a fella I knew who held the position before me to be the director of their music program. So I did group classes, individual lessons, community events, lots of things over there. And I had been teaching prior to that, and I had a couple of students with disabilities, but it certainly wasn't anything I ever saw as it would be the focus of my career, what I was doing. But after getting in at the ARC and after a little bit of culture shock, which I think is kind of natural, I found that, one, I enjoyed it. I'd always liked connecting with people, trying to figure out how they learn, what was the best way to reach them, what their individual goals were, and how to kind of work that way, which is what music lessons kind of are all about. You know, it's a form of expression, and it's a form of self. So finding out what that self is and helping people get to it was kind of what I had always done. But I also found out that the people with disabilities who may communicate different, may look very different, weren't any different at all. They were just people, the same as I had always worked with. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed helping them. And when I decided it was time to move on, I made a concerted effort to stay in the field. I happened to know someone whose son has a disability, and I had taught guitar lessons to, who had been one of the founding board members at the Progressive Center and was working there still. And through a series of conversations and applications and a whole ton of emails with Mr. Elliott, I ended up where I am now.
I talk about music as a curse just because it's such a hard way to make a living. But the fact of the matter is, it is a wonderful way to communicate with people of all ages, of all languages. You know, it doesn't matter what language people speak. And when you start to play and they listen or they play along with you, there's a communication that takes place there.
Yes, it's a deeper,
you can't describe it.
More primal, simple. You don't need a high level of cognition to have a deep level of appreciation and to be able to work within the medium.
Yeah, and music is language. But people don't realize, because a lot of people think music is math. And I go, oh, no. There is counting.
That's only the stuffy European people from the 17 and 1800s.
But it's really language. So you found this route to take that went from music into helping people. And I hope everybody who's out there listening, gets a lesson out of that tonight. And Scott, you also didn't get a master's degree in social work either.
That's correct.
So what were you doing?
Oh my goodness! I love work in the corporate. It wasn't corporate, the business world. But I went to Mercer County Community College, Trenton State College. I'm old. I'm showing how old I am. And then Penn State, Ogon's campus. But I love work. But actually, along the way, I had people coming in to my office saying, "Can I shut the door? I'd like to know how you do it. I would love to know how you go day to day with your, my scooter or this and that. I couldn't walk too well, and they just wanted to know how I could do it." So,
Scott, can we tell the people about your disability?
Yeah, it's a form of muscular dystrophy. It's called spinal muscular atrophy type 3. The children with type 1 aren't making it past 5 years old. There's some really cool stuff happening out there to help those children. Even me and my sister, who has the same disability, 2 out of the 4 siblings had it. And but my sister has a great mentality, very much different than me, very timid. I'm a little different in that it's just the drive is different. It's just and it's a male female thing probably, but my mom and dad were the best, hard workers. And they brought us up really right, and I think in the right way to also make sure we were independent, And by the way, guys, I'm very, not envious, but I did play the drums for a little while, And my mom, I drove everybody nuts, by the way, so.
Every drummer in the history of the world has driven everybody nuts. You were not alone in that regard. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
So you were working in the corporate world, and this disability was becoming sort of progressively worse? Is that what was happening?
Yes. I was very lucky to be in that world. I knew nothing about disability because I felt I was just a regular person in this world of diversity that, and here, lo and behold, a mid-career mid-40s age, life. I could be here all night explaining, what life, the trails of life, where they take you. But there's so much reward in what we do.
Yeah.
And, the last 20 years plus, the stories go on and on. And I left that world, retired for a very short time, and here we are.
I want to go there for a second. In the mid-'90s, you were going to retire, and the reason I want to talk about is because you were on Social Security, SSI or SSD?
SSD.
You were on Social Security disability.
I am like 0.0. It's a crazy percentage. I was on SSD, and those who get off are less than like 0.5%.
Yeah.
That go on to get off. Yes.
Once people go that route, it's a route that it's really hard to get away from, huh?
You're not kidding.
No.
You're not kidding. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. So you were there, and then you got the opportunity to also come to PCIL. Part of the reason being that they were looking for somebody with your sort of management skills, but also a disability. So you would walk the walk and talk the talk.
Yes, Greg, the history is simple. I saw an ad in the paper. I was bored to death being retired. I said, I got to get back in the workforce, do something. So it was like, I don't know. You can't be luckier when you answer an ad, you do an interview, you have a disability. I was using a scooter at that time. And the person who interviewed me had a significant disability. He was a board member of PCIL. And I can't be luckier. Now, there's an old advocate, I think I told you, he said we're escapees, Scott. When you get this lucky and you can get off Social Security, you don't need to be on Social Security. We need more people who can take advantage of that or be in that position. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's when you buy a lottery ticket, I think.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
So now, I always thought that PCIL was like just one place, but apparently it isn't. It's more than one.
Well,
one place.
Well,
I mean, we have two
offices
if we're talking about physical locations,
right?
But we have a lot of services. In fact, our motto is "One place, many services," and you kind of have to when you have the mission that we do to help anyone with any disability of any age achieve the level of independence, as much as they possibly can. So our focus is in sort of many directions. There are a lot of facets. One place, many facets.
Okay, and we're going to get to those on the other side of the break. But first, I just want to ask you, what's the daily of your job? You are the Independent Living Resource Specialist. So what do you do?
Well, the daily of my job is I never have any idea what the daily of my job is going to be.
Sounds exciting.
I do quite a few things. There's a number of programs that I kind of coordinate and manage. We have a recreation program and a summer scholarship program for youth with disabilities. Both are supported by grants through Mercer County. And both I oversee, both kind of handling the intake and outtake, getting scholarship monies out to either families or activities, as the case may be, setting up events, going to the events, holding them. We just had a softball game last night. So.
Oh, how did it go?
It was excellent. We had probably 65 or 70 people in total.
Oh, that's fantastic. How many players?
All? Not all, no. We had a number of people who come as volunteers, both family members and individuals with disabilities who are looking for socialization opportunities, or sometimes just opportunities to give back. Folks who have come through our programs and sort of moved on or gotten to where they want to be.
That's fantastic.
Very often come back and like to help other people do the same.
When you're running a nonprofit and you have an event and you can get 65 or 70 people to show up to it, I mean, that's a home run, no pun intended, on the softball game. But that really is. That's wonderful. Yes, sir.
You know what? It's Reed's a people person, man. It's that simple. And last night, he was pitching towards the end to make sure everybody had a bat. You just nailed it, Greg. When you get people out, and then it tracks them to other things we do, a little more in a serious manner. So, no.
Of course.
Reed does a lot of different things. We're a growing agency that We just want to, work with people. When I first came aboard, coming from that corporate mentality for 25 years, I hated saying we want to help people. We want to work with people to help themselves.
And Reed's got that performance background where he
Absolutely.
he knows how to read an audience. He knows how to engage them.
I lost my shame a long time ago.
But you know that great feeling that you get when you give energy and then you get energy back from a crowd.
Yeah.
Where people
when you see smiles, you see people engaged and having fun and smiles, and but you can also work with them on a more serious matter, a resource or something. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Now we're going to take a short break here. When we come back, don't go away, Scott, okay? Don't hang up the phone. When we come back, we're going to talk a lot about PCIL and exactly what it is you guys are up to, okay?
Okay, great.
All right, don't go away. Hit that share button on Facebook. Isn't that the best?
Certainly not. Oh.
There we go. Now we're back. Before we go further, I do need to thank all the people who made donations to Age Out Angels this week. We thank you so very much for your generous donations, and probably also the ones who made donations to PCIL as well. If you have an employee giving fund or matching gifts foundation associated with your place of work, we would certainly appreciate your contacting us and telling us how we can participate in that. Private message me on Facebook or email to greg@ageoutangels.org. And I want to remind everyone that you can donate to Age Out Angels every time you make a purchase from Amazon. All you have to do is designate Age Out Angels to be your Amazon Smile designee, and a portion of your payment will go to Age Out Angels without it costing you 1 penny more. And I can make it easy for you to designate Age Out Angels as your Amazon Smile recipient. All you have to do is contact me either via Facebook or greg@ageoutangels.org, and I can send you a link that will take you directly to our designation. Back now with Scott Elliott and Reed Thomas, and a big hello out there to Jesus and Stefan. Stefan's listening from Sweden. Bless your heart, my friend. I am so it makes me feel so warm to see your name pop up on my screen every week. And Ed is out there listening tonight, and Tony is listening, and Tony is sharing us on Facebook. You guys are wonderful. Thanks. I appreciate it. Now, back to Scott and Reed from PCIL. You mentioned that you serve anyone of any age. You are the only organization, I think, that's ever been interviewed here that has no age restrictions. That is correct?
That is correct.
So what's the eligibility?
You have to be living with a disability.
Okay.
I mean, literally.
Wide open, Greg.
Yeah.
Wide open.
No severity, no specific diagnosis. You don't have to bring us medical documentation or have your doctor fill out a form and, okay, we'll work with you now. It's just not at all like that.
And when did all this start, Scott? Do you know?
Geez, it started in California in the early to mid-'70s with a fellow named Ed Roberts, who had to use an iron lung every day to keep himself going. And the independent living movement started then. That's when it started. There's about 500 centers for independent living around the country right now. He was on the University of California, Berkeley, and a wonderful guy. He gave up living, and somebody talked him into living, and he lost 50 pounds before that. And Mr. Roberts is up there with some of the biggest, best advocates in the world for people, not just, we're talking about differences. We're talking about, which is great, I love it. I mean, just the commitment that they had, that has others have, with it, whether you have a disability or not, there is a lot of commitment
and Reed,
out there.
Reed, what we're talking about here, the whole thing that we're talking about here is independent living, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, we are first and foremost an advocacy organization, and independence is at the core of everything that we do. Again, there's a lot of different sort of branches to what we do, but they all break down to advocating for people to be as independent as they can be and to be self-advocates. I often tell we advocate so that you advocate for yourself. We want to teach you to fish, to use an old cliche.
Right, right. And of course, all parents of children who have some form of disability, have that worry in the back of their heads of, what's going to happen when I'm gone, right? What will happen to this person when I'm gone?
Sure.
And so, do you find that you're actually, do you find that people are inclined to live independently, or do you think that they just sort of rather have that safety net of having their whole family around them all the time?
Well, I mean, as you just point out, the safety net is a temporary thing, and it's a temporary thing for all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, in my experience anyway, there may be some who are independently wealthy enough not to ever have to worry about it,
Right.
But that's certainly not the majority. And yeah, I mean, people with disabilities are people. You might as well drop the with disabilities off the back of the term. So just like yourself and myself and Scott and the other folks in this room and the township and the country, everybody is sort of forging their own path. And our goal is to try to empower, to help them achieve whatever they want, to not have, to gain the knowledge and the understanding and to put aside the fears, or at least be able to work through them. I don't know if any of us ever put the fears aside. I haven't yet. I don't know if you have.
Right. But not let them stop you.
Exactly. I mean, we all have barriers. We all have challenges. Our minds all work in different ways, as do our bodies. And it's just a matter of finding the right workaround, finding the right path, finding the right commitment, what means something enough to you to work towards it, get there, and then look at what the next thing is.
Absolutely. And Scott, tell me a little bit about your job. What does the executive director at PCIL do on a day-to-day basis?
Geez, it's just to share the commitment. I'm careful about the word passion because it can blind some people. Don't get me wrong. I love some of the people out there with passion, but it's to share the commitment of working with people with disabilities and their families and really caring about that on a day-to-day basis. And my staff is wonderful. My board is great. So my job day-to-day, obviously day-to-day, I have a couple of great managers and great staff. I don't want to be into the micromanaging part, but I want to make sure everybody knows they can contact me with a question, anything, like a family. But that said, my staff knows they can give me any input they want. And day-to-day, I'm working with other agencies. What it's really all about is collaborating and partnering with other agencies to do the best we can to create a path and an avenue for folks of all different diversity populations to achieve what they need to achieve. Like Reed just said, you get so many different things, the income, this, that, and it's just so important to make sure we're there for families.
Yeah.
The relationship building of a family is what really is still an advocacy based. Everything is attached to advocacy. Everything is. So
now we hear
yeah.
that word diversity a lot, Scott. We in the discourse right now we hear the word a lot. Do you think, in your opinion, anecdotally speaking, do you think the resistance to diversity is diminishing just a little bit?
Right. I hope not, but I will say with some of our leadership in this country right now, it may be. Our diversity population is the largest of any disability population, which goes from young to older.
Right.
Is the largest diversity population in the United States and the world. So nobody should ignore that.
And right, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, there's certainly a lot of rhetoric that doesn't have tolerance. right now in the political discourse. But you know,
Yeah.
but is it easier now to get a job for a person with a disability than it was, say, 25 or 30 years ago?
Maybe a little bit, a fraction, right? A fraction.
So we have a long way
No,
to go.
there's a long road, and it's people who care. Put agencies aside. It's people who care, whether it's a family member, an agency staff member, or whatever, that's going to advocate and work alongside someone to let them know their abilities, not their disability. So
Right,
no.
right. That's a
And,
good way
and
to
that's
put
what
it.
it's all about.
Go ahead, Reed.
Not only that, it's about recognizing the strength in diversity. It's about recognizing what someone with a background different than yourself brings to the table, which quite often is something that maybe you don't bring to the table. And if you have a sort of homogenized organization, nobody brings that to the table. I won't sort of elaborate on this, but I've been going back to school myself, and I took a cultural communications class, and I had to do an essay about a subculture in this country, and I chose adults with developmental disabilities because I was working with them one-on-one. I could observe very closely and apply the lessons. And in doing this, I did a lot of research, and there are some legitimate, sort of solid reasons that you should employ someone with a disability. One, it probably means more to them than it does your average person. Your average person changes jobs once every 1.5 to 2 years. Your average person with a disability who is employed has been there a minimum of 3 years, quite typically 5 to 10 years. So there are, you have to look at that. You have to look at what the strengths of a diverse populace are, not the, potential negatives, and not the fear that comes along with not understanding someone else's background.
Right, and I've heard it said many, many times that there are just certain jobs that play directly into the strengths, of specific disabilities like autism or something like that, and other factors as well that I think you were sort of touching on just now, like loyalty, and desire to never, call in sick,
and to want to prove yourself. Some people feel very entitled to things, whereas a person with disability doesn't necessarily. They want to prove themselves.
Yeah. I hate to paint it with such a broad brush, though, Scott. Isn't everyone still an individual, whether you have a disability or not, right?
Oh, great. Absolutely. I've done presentations, and I look at my world. Everyone either has a disability or does not. We're just all different. And you know what? Take advantage of someone that's a little different, that could bring something to your agency, your workplace, or whatever. Take advantage of that.
Absolutely. And we always used to say this in IEP meetings. If they didn't call it special ed, everybody would want it.
Oh my goodness.
And that's
it's like our courses, Greg, now in the high schools and stuff. The transition programs for the youth, they got to apply to everyone, for crying out loud.
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about the transition program. Is it Reed? Can you get us started with that? You guys have what's called a transition program.
Well, transition is one of the core services of a Center for Independent Living, and it sort of means two things. It means transition from institutional living, such as group homes or nursing homes, into community settings, and it means the transition from youth to adulthood. And we certainly have programs that assist with all of that. We've been really expanding as far as our youth transition programs. We have a number of pre-employment services, classes run through the schools, classes run on a one-on-one basis with job sampling and that sort of thing. We have a RAMP Ready to Achieve mentorship program, thanks to the juvenile justice system, who's generously given us a grant, and to pat ourselves on the back, quite recently agreed to double the amount and the scope of that grant so we can reach more folks. We are currently looking for mentors. If you know anyone who wants to mentor youth with disability who's of high school age and about to transition into the next step of their life, we're actively looking, so please reach out to us.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? But it's okay to put the plug out there. That's all right.
You gave me airtime, Greg. I'm going to use it.
That's wonderful. What? Scott, are you still out there?
Absolutely.
Scott, what are the biggest?
I just got a cup of coffee out with you.
What are the biggest roadblocks that you find that young people face when they're trying to make that transition from I guess being an adolescent to to taking on adult responsibilities? Are they eager to do that?
You know what is interesting? It's the roadblocks are very similar to others in general.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'll just take my situation very quickly. I could only do certain things. I physically could not do a lot of jobs that my father and my older brother could do. So the roadblocks are whether you have a physical disability or a learning disability or something, your opportunities become less. So the roadblocks are really trying to make sure you tune your skills, your talents, your whatever, education to something you're really interested in, and then going for it. Because, we've had people that want to be a rock star, sort of like you two, by the way. And then you just get them in that world. Just get them somewhere in that world. So no, it's really the obstacles. Like I say, on one hand, it's no different than others, but our opportunities are a little less. Our opportunities, whether you have a physical or mental disability, are definitely less. So that means you got to work harder to get out there and just say, let me try this, let me do this, and on the other end, let me tell you, there's obstacles there for that mentality that says, I don't want to hire person with a disability, whether mental or physical, because it's going to cost me. I'm going to have to supervise them. You know what? There needs a lot of education, which we also do, by the way. And a lot of education.
Are there
some really good employers?
Are there programs like maybe the state or the federal government or something to subsidize things like cost and stuff like that? Do those programs exist?
Greg, there are, but they're very indirect. They're very specific. You usually have to go for grants for those programs.
Yeah.
There are laws in place that help, meaning a reasonable accommodations for people, but a lot of employers don't understand what that means, So, there's stuff out there. But again, it gets back to an educational process to let employers know what's out there. Don't be afraid, and that's where a lot of our advocacy comes in. So no, there's stuff out there to support, and in the long run, I heard you guys talk about it. It's such a plus sometimes. I know some people that have been in place for 20 years working,
sure,
and just have been such a positive influence on the other coworkers in their organization.
Absolutely, yeah. But Reed, do they willingly make that transition from adolescence to adulthood, or do their parents bring them in kicking and screaming?
No, I mean, a lot of the youth are motivated. They do want to. I mean, there are certainly other factors that must be considered, and there are certainly a lot of fears involved. Not that there aren't for anybody transitioning. Right. And I think one of the major issues it's a turnover of your support system, as it is for most of us. But most of us don't necessarily have to rely on the system as heavily as maybe someone with a physical disability or an intellectual disability do. So when you're in school, just actually met with a young man, his mother and his brother the other day, and he's exactly at this point. He's 18. He just graduated from high school. He's looking at going to college. Well, in high school, his high school accommodated him with a nurse. He's got some physical issues, and so there was someone who was with him all day. It was done through the schools, considered reasonable accommodation. He had this support. His family was very supportive outside of there, so he was pretty much set 24 hours a day. His needs were taken care of. College doesn't provide that.
No.
His family also has a desire for them to go back to work. They want his transition to be an opportunity for them. Not that they're not going to be his support system, but they're not going to be able to be there 24/7 to go to campus with him. They want him to start developing these things because, as we talked about earlier, the family safety net is not there forever. There comes a point that you have to face doing things on your own.
Right.
And the things that were there for this individual and for a lot of people as a youth aren't there as an adult. So part of advocacy and part of transition is helping people learn how to find those supports, whether it's an organization like us that you can call for whatever you want, any issue that you have, any goal, you can call me, and if I know the answer, I'll tell you right away. If it involves having you come in and working a little closer, we'll set up an appointment.
Right.
Or if it involves referring you to a transportation organization because that's where your struggles are, it's about knowing how to set up your own support system.
Right.
Because we all need one.
Yes, absolutely. And so on that subject, we have 1 minute left, Scott. You must have to do a lot of outreach personally with other organizations to be able to refer people effectively to programs that will help them the best. Is that right?
And Greg, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And it gets to the root of being a people person, and that works throughout. That works right on up from the bottom up. So the collaboration among agencies is so critical. I sit on boards with agencies that don't do what we do just for that reason. Like it's so important. It's so important to be out there almost every day, whether it's phone calls, email, or at meetings or events, just to collaborate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Reed, 20 seconds to go. Where can the people find you online?
Well, it's pcil.org, nice and easy. If I can throw our phone number out there, it's
Go right ahead.
609-581-4500. I always tell folks that a Center for Independent Living is a great first call. If you've got a goal, if you've got a problem, if you're not sure where to turn, if we can't help you directly, chances are we're familiar with who can, and we will do our best to get you on the right path.
Scott Elliott and Reed Thomas, thank you so much for being here. We're going to take a short break. Still time to hit that share button on Facebook. Don't go away. I'll be back in a minute with some final words. And we are back. From a website called Belong comes a blog written by a very interesting lady named Fee Newwood. Fee Newwood is her name. She's raised countless foster youth and worked in the industry, and she has written 10 therapeutic approaches to trauma rages. How to handle a situation when your child becomes enraged. Rages are certainly up there among the most difficult behaviors to manage in fostering and adoption, or in child raising in general. Everybody's blood pressure goes up when a child hits a tantrum level, right? Boy, especially if it's in public, you start to wonder if everybody's looking at you saying, world's worst parent. Now we can identify who she is. Fee Newwood worked in residential care where a lot of the young people had experienced foster placement breakdowns due to their anger and aggression issues. And while every situation and every child is different, she believes that the following 10 recommendations will work for everyone. And the first is to know the difference, know what a trauma rage is. This is not the kind of rage or temper tantrum that we're talking about when a kid doesn't get the toy they want in a store like what used to be Toys R Us. No, this is the kind of trauma rage where something very different is going on. A trauma rage, that means a rage that comes from the result of childhood trauma, is where one of two things is going on for the child. Either the current situation feels very scary and the child is completely overwhelmed and unable to control their emotions and behavior, or the current situation reminds them of a time when they were really scared. They're acting now as though their present is their past. They feel completely overwhelmed and unable to control their emotions or behaviors. And the one I think about when I think of that second one, reminds them of a time when they're easily scared, is the child who was sexually abused and is sent to a group home. And in the group home, it lights out at 10 o'clock every night. And so at 10 o'clock, the child lays in bed and petrified, because when they hear the click of the light going off and the light disappearing from the room going dark, they know that's when they get abused. And they start to relive that over and over again. So remember, we're talking about trauma rage here. Rages often appear like a child's way of manipulating the adult world around them, when that's exactly what they aren't. It's important to recognize that the child is out of control. They're in a rage because they cannot contain themselves and need you to provide containment for them. This is not easy, but it is possible. The only way a child will end a rage on their own is either because the situation changes and is no longer scary for them, or because they rage to the point of exhaustion and just switch off. And of course, the latter is not good for the child. So to reduce the number of rages in the first place, we can reduce the number of times a young person's trauma history is triggered. As you get to know the child more, it will become clear what their triggers may be. And it's helpful to write down different occasions when rages happen and then be curious about what the similarities are. Once you're able to work out the triggers, you can avoid the situations or prepare the child for them, or prepare yourself. Now, this is interesting. The second thing here, after identifying the trauma, is to keep safety as the number one priority. Reminds me of something that we used to teach people in Boy Scouts. When you see a person hurt along the side of the road, your initial instinct is to jump out and help them, find out what's wrong with them. And that's really not what you're supposed to do first. The first thing you're supposed to do is assess the surroundings and make sure that danger isn't there for you as well. So rule number 2 in Fee's book is keep safety as the number one priority. Rages are all about safety, the child feeling unsafe. And yet the child is usually behaving in a way that feels very unsafe to those around them. It's worth remembering that, because safety has to be the focus when managing such a situation. The child's safety, your safety, and the safety of those around you both. You must do whatever is needed to maintain this, and it may need to recruit someone else to help you. And remember that safety being the number one priority, there is no shame in getting help. It is vital. Number 3, self-awareness and self-care. The tendency is to put all our focus on the child. However, it is vital that first and foremost you are aware of yourself. And here's what that means. When a child gets scared and behaves in a scary way, it can be all too easy for the parent to become scared and also behave in a scary way in return. Their anger is met by your anger, and so the situation escalates, and neither of you are in control. Ms. Newwood says, here's a quote, "When I first started fostering, I would often say that the hardest part was managing the children's behaviors. I now know that's not true. The hardest behavior to manage is my own. To remain calm in chaos is not easy. My children's rages did trigger difficulties in my own history and made me feel unsafe. Learning to control my own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors was one of the biggest ways for me to succeed in working alongside their trauma rages." Number 4, assess your surroundings. When a rage begins, scan the environment and look for anything that might make the situation more unsafe. Encourage the child to move to areas that are soft. A beanbag hurts less than a chair. Think about other people in the area. Are they going to be helpful, or are they going to cause the situation to escalate? Try to remove people, actually. An audience is not usually helpful. People don't want to leave, though. They're drawn to the whole drama, or they think they can help when they actually can't. This is an interesting one. Number 5 is use safety language. When a child feels unsafe, one of the easiest and quickest ways to reduce the rage is to give safety messages. These are short, clear sentences that you can repeat as a way of letting them know that they are not at risk. Sentences like, "You are safe," "I'm not going to hurt you," "Nothing bad is going to happen." You can use safety language to acknowledge their feelings. "I know this feels really scary at the moment," but then return immediately to the safety message. "Nothing bad will happen to you." These sentences, when said in a calm, controlled manner, can have a soothing effect. It shows that you're seeing beyond the presenting issue to the underlying cause, that something or someone is making them feel unsafe. Use simple language. Don't try to discuss behavior or reason with a child in the middle of rage. Don't explain why the behavior is not acceptable and what the consequences will be. On a biological level, this cannot work. When we're scared, our brain goes into survival mode. The child can't rationalize, can't consider consequences of their behavior, and it's unlikely to have any empathy towards the people they are impacting. They're simply not thinking, so keep the language simple. Meet their basic needs is number 7. The child is raging because their brain is telling them they're unsafe. A great way to connect with the survival part is the brain is by meeting the child's basic needs. Offer them food. Food lets their brain know that they're okay. They're not about to die. Also, being the provider of comfort, offering them a blanket. Warmth, containment a child feels from being wrapped can be very soothing. Number 8, challenge only when unsafe. When dealing with ragers, we need to be as much on the side with the child as possible. Challenging them will only increase their feelings of being unsafe. Touch or don't touch. This is something you have to be very, very careful with. Touching can be effective, but not in a containing kind of way. If you're going to touch a child who's in a rage, you would first let them know. You would say, "Can I touch your hand? Can I touch your forehead? You're sweating. Can I wipe your forehead? Can I do that?" And if it's accepted, then you can, maybe go to the next step with that. And finally, repair in a relationship between you and your child is everything. It will be the greatest place of struggle, but it will also be the place where healing happens. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, another hour talking about youth who should matter more in our political discourse. Thank you so much to Hamilton Radio, to my most excellent guests, Scott Elliott and Reed Thomas from PCIL. Thanks to our engineer, Doc G, our producer, Rob, and music provided by Kurt Seldenbridge, owner and operator of the Cave Rehearsal Recording Space. Join me next Thursday, August 23rd at 8 p.m. when my guest will be Antonio Garcia from the University of Pennsylvania. So until then, let's make this week the best week ever. Good night.